I'm having a really tough time watching Toronto Raptors this year. Feels like work. And I got into this business because I didn't want to do work. I wanted it to feel fun. And when I watch the Raptors, it's a chore. It is. I'm sorry. It's a chore. I enjoy watching Scotty Barnes. And outside of that, not so much. Does Siakam put together the odd 30-piece where I go, dude, this guy's underrated and he really is awesome. He would really be an awesome number two. Are there nights where I watch OG Anunoby play defense and say, this is really nice. This is enjoyable.
Are there nights where you watch Jakob Poeltl
get 2 blocks? He got Trae Young. That was nice. The 3 games ago now. That was nice. I did enjoy that close to the game. But yeah, watching Jakob Poeltl underneath the basket is, it's all right. It's fine. I don't know if it's worth a first-round pick and $20 million or if it ever was, but yeah.
It's fine.
But yeah, Scotty Barnes' progress has been great. It hasn't always been this way, though, throughout the entire season. Like, there was a long stretch of games where he was not the team's leading scorer and that, he was putting together, 13, 14, 15-point games while doing some other things. But yeah, Barnes has not been without his struggles this year. Like, it's been up and down. This last stretch of games, I think just pretty much all of December, he's been much, much better. I think the one game that was really bad was the Miami game that I think about. Because I'm still watching these. Shockingly, I am still recording these and watching them. And yeah, the only difference is that there are more games where I go, okay, I get it. And I don't need to watch to finish to the fourth quarter or whatever. But yeah, they're pretty unwatchable. And I think a big part of this, the case I was outlining earlier, is that there's carryover here too, right? This isn't just the first year of it. Because to me, when it was unwatchable in Tampa during the pandemic season, the thing that you had was a lot of goodwill that was still there from the championship. The championship was close enough where you said, hey guys, you're having a year off. You're having a ton of injuries. Your team got sick. You had to move to and play in a different arena on the road. You can't be at home in Toronto. You can't be in your own beds. We get it. We're all pretty forgiving of this. I don't remember people being too mad. I remember there being some debate over whether they should tank or not and going, how is this even a discussion? Tank? Clearly tank. They weren't very good. And they needed to inject some young talent in the team. And they ended up getting Scotty Barnes because of it. So, again, it's just like, yeah, retroactively, not all tanks always work, but that year that just tanks 1 year and then can grab a player around what is a potential contender the next year. Like, that's kind of an ideal circumstance. The one thing that, I remember thinking about the Bengals earlier this year when Joe Burrow was really hurt, thinking, man, if the Bengals actually really end up falling in this draft and they end up with a special talent that they can put around this team, that could really, really help them. Not to mention the subsequent drafts where they'll be picking high. But anyways, that was kind of the position the Raptors were in. So I never thought that season was like unwatchable in the same way. To me, unwatchable carries over when you really don't care about the result of the game. Is when you know that you're too good to be the worst or somewhere close to it. You've had a couple of seasons where you have been bad and you've seen a lot of the story already play out and you're not exactly sure what you're supposed to be watching for. Like I said, to me, I'm watching for Scotty Barnes right now, but there is part of me that's going, okay, but how many of these pieces are going to be around Scotty Barnes this year? And how are they going to build out the team around Scotty Barnes? And do I feel some anxiety about what the future of OG Anunoby is and what the future of Pascal Siakam is and Gary Trent Jr. and how they're going to make this thing work, how they're going to make this thing operate, like where they're going to get better guard depth from, how they're going to fill the rest of the roster around Barnes over the next few seasons, I think is very, very, very much in question. Did they hire the right coach? Like, it's hard to watch that. If the season was solely focused on Scotty Barnes' development and those players, I would go, okay, cool. There's some pieces around him. There's young guys that are going to grow. But not having really any certainty about pretty much all of the players on the roster outside of him beyond 2 years from now is difficult. It really is. Okay, so the most unwatchable teams the last decade. From the Toronto Maple Leafs, the 2015 Leafs. Oh, this was a bad year. Going over this again was mildly traumatic, actually, because I remembered that not only were they 30, 44, and 8, again, just at the bottom. They did get Mitch Marner from this draft, but this doesn't count. I'm saying, like, in the moment, you knew they weren't one of the worst teams in hockey. They actually had a pretty decent start to the season where they were kind of in it and around it for a while, and then they just did their Leafy thing, and it wasn't the 18-wheeler season, but it was not great. And yeah, Randy Carlyle was the coach. He ends up getting fired, and then they brought in Peter Horachek, and Now, if you remember this time, if you were a Leafs fan, you will remember that when poor Peter Horachek got put in there, it was some of the most dog performances you will ever see from a hockey team. Like, if there has ever been a lame duck coach that the players just decided that they were not going to give effort for, it was Peter Horachek. That is his special place in Toronto Maple Leafs history. Some of the toughest hockey to watch ever. The leading scorer on that team was Phil Kessel with 61 points. JVR led the team in goals with 27. This is also down the line. And you went, okay, the top four scorers, Phil, JVR, Bozak, Kadri, that wasn't so bad, right? Those four guys. Yeah, except for the guys after them. Tied with 11 goals. So after those top four guys, tied with 11 goals, these names: Mike Santorelli, Peter Holland,
Yeah.
and Richard Panik, each at 11. After them, the infamous David Clarkson and Joffrey Lupul, who ended up having his obviously awful breakup with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their whole team, it was not a really watchable thing. You were kind of hoping for the Kadri stuff. Phil was clearly at the end of his Leafs tenure. The team, it was just, there's nothing sadder when you're watching a team where things are kind of closing out and you go, wait, what is the direction? What is actually happening here? But for the most part, the team was really, really, really unwatchable. This was also the year that Jonathan Bernier, who actually had looking at the season, the goalie tandem was not horrific. It's part of the reason that they were sort of okay. If they won a lot of these 30 games, I got to say that it was on the backs of what was like Bernier had a less than 3 goals against average. He had a 914 save. He was all right, but it was not a great year for him. We don't remember that because the memorable part was that he went to the Giants of Africa gala and he said, quote, Nelson Mandela is one of the most known athletes in the world, end quote. Yeah, not great. Yeah, not great. But yeah, the real proof of how they were unwatchable was March 23rd against the Minnesota Wild, because that game snapped a 13-year-long sellout streak for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that's how unwatchable that group was. That Leaf fans, the one place where it's impossible to get a ticket, where you know they're going to sell out basically despite any roster that they cobble together. That in 13 years, they finally snapped that. Anyway, Morgan Rielly was the only reason to watch. It was his second year in the NHL. He kind of took a bit of a step. He led the blue line in points. He was quality. You could see a little bit of the something that was Morgan Rielly at that point in time. But yeah, outside of that, it was a pretty unwatchable season. And yeah, hockey, oof. Watching for the tank is really tough.
It is tough.
It's really tough. Out of all the sports, like at least basketball, you know you're going to get some player who's going to come in and potentially immediately just change your franchise, right?
Yeah.
Hockey, it doesn't always feel that way. If it's the McDavid draft, which they did try to tank, you feel all right. But this one, yeah, that was the most unwatchable Leaf season last decade. The most unwatchable team for me in the last decade was worse than this Raptors team. And I can't wait to go over because people said the 2023 Jays. Okay, the 2023 Jays were a tough watch, okay? It wasn't a fun season.
Yeah. Vibes were bad all year.
Yeah, even Mark Shapiro said it where he went, I can't remember a team that made the playoffs that was this difficult to watch night in, night out. The runners in scoring position stuff, the base running stuff, the lack of success at home, the lack of the long balls at home, Vladdy's dip in production and wondering what the hell was going on there, the Varsho trade, right? But ultimately that team won 89 games and did make it to the postseason. There were games in the middle of the summer. I was there. I go to a lot of these, like the Braves series, that were fun moments in the season. They were infinitely more watchable than the 2018 Toronto Blue Jays. Okay, so yeah, again, carryover matters. 2017 was brutal. 2017, the team essentially closed the book. They tried to bring back Jose. They said, all right, we'll give this one more go. We'll bring in Kendrys Morales instead of, they did the half rebuild thing on the fly. It didn't work out. They were bad in 2017. But after that bad 2017, they go 73 and 89. Josh Donaldson gets hurt immediately in the season. Immediately. After an offseason of what's going to happen with this guy? Should you be trading him right now? Did you have a deal on the table with the St. Louis Cardinals that was going to bring back a big package, split people in this fan base? People were going, oh, crap. Curtis Granderson gets jeered at the home opener. The one guy that we signed that everyone was like, oh, Curtis Granderson, we all love him. He couldn't catch a fly ball. and people booed him, or they gave him the Bronx cheer when he finally caught a fly ball. They went 9-19 in May, which led to one of the most insufferable lines that Blue Jays fans, it's early, it's early, it's early, over and over and over again, Blue Jays fans were told, even though the season was a death march from that point forward. They finished with a slightly above league average OPS that year. They were 14th, so you went, okay, actually offense was a little bit better than I thought, and they hit a shocking amount of bombs. They were 5th. Problem is that all the home runs were hit by the likes of Unwatchable, Randall Grichuk, Justin Smoke, 25 bombs for those two guys that year. Aledmus Diaz, Kendrys Morales. You did have a slightly watchable uptick from Teoscar Hernandez, who started to flash some of the power and some of the promise that he was going to have for the Toronto Blue Jays in the upcoming years. But yeah, that's one of the more positive stories for this team. That's one of the most positive stories for this entire team. And here's the thing. All that offense was counteracted by the 4th worst ERA in all of baseball from the pitching staff. That also gave up the 5th most home runs. So for all the long balls that you could be happy about from Unwatchable and Aledmus Diaz and Kendrys Morales, you also saw a lot of home runs going out the other way. They had 24 starts from Sam Gaviglio that year. 24 from Sam Gaviglio. That's too many Sam Gaviglio starts. That's a very unwatchable thing to see Sam Gaviglio start. Like, again, say what you will about the 2023 Blue Jays. I could watch their starting pitchers go into any game and feel like you had a shot at winning. That was watchable. Was watching Chris Bassett. That was watchable, seeing Yusei Kikuchi bounce back. It was always watchable watching Kevin Gausman. Here wasn't what was watchable. Marco Estrada posting a 5.64 ERA. Aaron Sanchez posting a 4.89 ERA. And Marcus Stroman posting a 5.54 ERA. And by the way, that was like a huge component of this too, is that this was the death of the happiest Blue Jays teams that we could remember in 2015 and 2016. Devin Travis's career ended. Josh Donaldson wanted out all year long, and like I said, spent most of it on IR. Only played a few games here. Remember the reports of him, he's now running on hard ground. And they ended up trading him for nothing over to Cleveland. He just miraculously got healthy enough to play one game and get traded before the deadline, if you do recall. Russell Martin's career ended with him finishing with a lower OPS than Luke Maile. And yeah, Marco Estrada ended his career with, like I said, an ERA of 5.64. Aaron Sanchez, it was over for him as well as a Blue Jay with the 4.89. Same with Marcus Stroman, who gets dealt the next year. But yeah, 5.54. The bloom was off the rose. The one thing Blue Jays had in the season was there was a J-Happ trade to monitor, because J-Happ was carrying the rotation. He was the shining star. The Jays didn't have a lot to trade that year, okay? It was going to be a very difficult rebuild. But you looked at J-Happ, and it was baseball always needs starting pitchers. And he was great until his final 4 starts with the Toronto Blue Jays, where he got absolutely eviscerated in 2 of them. And was kind of bad in 1. And then they were very conservative with him in his last start. And then they ended up trading him to not just anybody, but to the New York Yankees. And you say to yourself, well, it must have been for a lot. No, the value with J-Happ was diminished by those few starts, which put a lot of question marks around what you're actually trading for. Hey, are you actually just giving up stuff from a number 3? But even still, no one thought they were getting back Brandon Drury and Billy McKinney. Brandon Drury and Billy McKinney. That was what you waited to see all season long, which made it even more unwatchable because both of those guys came in here and were terrible. Although Ennis loved Billy McKinney, and I'll never let him forget it. He loved him until we were at a Blue Jays home opener doing a show, and Billy McKinney canceled on our show last minute.
Wow.
Yeah, and then finally Ennis was out.
He crossed Ennis.
Yeah, he crossed Ennis, and then finally Ennis was out. And this one is a lesser one because it didn't make it, unwatchable, but made baseball even tougher that year. They traded Steve Pearce for cash and Santiago Espinal to the Boston Red Sox, where he would go on to win World Series MVP for a team that most people in this market hate. So anyways, when next time you think, oh, the Jays in 2023 were unwatchable and I'm never coming back to the ballpark, just remember that you sat through that. If you're a real fan, you sat through that season. And yeah. That's much, much worse than winning 89 games with a good pitching staff and having at least some, good players to watch on the roster. Just a little perspective. Again, I hated the 2023 team. I was very much on record with that last year. There were a lot of things to be upset about. But there's a difference between, collective beatdowns and an unwatchability of those two teams. So that's it to me, is I have, in the last decade, the 2023-2024 Raptors, 2014-15 Leafs, and the 2018 Blue Jays. Those are the three most unwatchable teams in Toronto sports in the last decade.